The Ov-10 Bronco from Hangar 9 is coming along very nicely. Welcome to video 3 in the series. If you missed video 1 and 2, there's some links down below to the playlist. Last video, we got lots accomplished. This video, we're moving into the rudders and gear mounting, gear doors, and wherever else the manual takes us. So let's dive back in to this very cool custom aircraft. Last video, we finished up our wing basically, got all of our surfaces done. This video, we are starting on the pods. We also got the speckle coat in the inside of the fuselage painted. So the manual takes us to the rudders now is where it takes us to. And with that, we move into everything else that mounts in the nacelles or the pods. So we've got our rudder servo to mount in there. We've got our landing gear to mount, so lots to go in that thing. So let's continue on with where the manual is directing us. All right, so we're getting the rudder set up to mount on our vertical stab. Nothing's really different here. Everything's the same process we've already done. So we're just copying exactly what we've done on the other surfaces. All right, so a little note here about the vertical stab or rudder. These are all done. That guy, we've taken the tape off already. And one little note here is you want to make sure that you've got a decent gap between the top of the rudder and the vertical stab. These obviously, they're not, you know, when you put yours together, it could be a little bit skewed this way, a little bit skewed this way. And what I did here to ensure that we don't have any conflict between our rudder and the vertical stab is put a couple layers of paper in there. This is like the manual for one of the things just folded up. And when you take this off now, there's a decent gap here, so there's going to be no interference. Same thing we did on this one. I took one of the invoices for the Unilight controller, and we've got good space there and no interference. This one especially, when I put it together, it was really skewed this direction. And then when you tape these like that, if you tape this side first, it'll also put more pressure and tilt it. So just be aware of that. You want to make sure that you don't have any interference there. And our rudders are good to go. So we're going to come back to the rudders, and we are going to move on to our doors on the nacelles. So I actually like this door setup. I'm not a huge fan of the door material. It's plastic. One of the benefits of the plastic doors, this one actually had a bit of a bend in it. Like it was bowed out quite a bit, quite substantially. By the end of it, it was about an inch the wrong direction. So I just heated this up, molded it back into place, let it cool, and now it's nice and straight. So that's one of the benefits of this door setup. The pin chins on here actually work very well. They keep it out of the way. So we're just using the same methods that we've used to do all of our surfaces, and we're going to get these guys hinged. And you want to make sure these are adjusted well. There's a nice even gap all the way around in between the two doors. Tape them in place and let them cure. But this style of hinge and everything on here really works well, and make sure there's no interference with the surface versus the door. All right, so our doors are hinged on the nacelles, and we've also got the nose door done. I just decided to do that because we're here. Let's get all the hinging done. Now the hinging on our aircraft is finished. The doors are pretty straightforward. The only kicker with it, it's not like a surface. So when you do these, they're kind of floating. So what you want to do is get that gap, the space between the doors, between the sides of the doors and everything, kind of get that dealt with before you tape it down, because there is quite a bit of wiggle room in all that stuff. So just something to be aware of. And we're going to let those pieces cure, and we'll come back to the doors. We also had our wire arrive today. So this is 10 gauge power wire. So this is the power wire we're going to be using to run the battery power to the nacelles to plug in the ESCs. So all of our gear doors are done. We've taken the tape off, obviously, and they work wonderfully. So both pods or nacelles, and also the front as well. So that's good. Happy with that. We're going to move on to continuing with our nacelle construction, and what that looks like is doing our rudder servo first. So we're going to get that queued up here with the rudder servo, and then I think after that we move into the doors, possibly, I believe. All right, so we did a couple things here on the nacelles. So our wire for our horizontal stab or elevator surface comes through the right-hand side. So we ran our wires on the right-hand nacelle. So we've got our servo wire and our power wire for the lighting system. So that just goes back. There was strings installed from Hangar 9, and we've got that stuck in place here. So because this is going to be fixed on this side, we wrap that in black electrical tape and C8 it to the sidewall there. So the excess is going to be inside the horizontal stab, right? So this is going to be fixed just like that. And then we pushed our rods through and installed them onto the ball joints, got that all attached. So those are ready to go and the back end's done. So that pretty much sets things up for the servo installation. Basically, we're going to have our servo mounted just like that. Obviously, our arm is sticking out like this, and our rear surface is centered right there. So when we get that ball joint on there, we'll pretty much be perpendicular to the rod, which is what we're looking for. We may have to cut that a little bit, but anyways, it's really close with the way it's mounted. So we're going to get both of our servos centered first of all, and we'll get them screwed down into the fuselage with our carbon arm on here. Now, if you're following the manual for this aircraft, you'll notice that especially on these rudders, I mean, it shows it in many different areas on the manual, but an area like this, the manual clearly depicts that you're using plastic servo arms. So you can see here, plastic servo arm, they say cut all the other pieces off. Not a good idea to put a ball joint on a plastic servo arm. We've talked about that already. And that's just going to cause a lot of flex in that servo arm. It's not going to give you good control surface, not good for durability and longevity. So that's something that we do not do here in the shop. All right, so both of our rudder surfaces are now completed and everything turned out really well. I'm happy with everything. So there's the servo mounted. I'll show you what it looks like here. So we've got lots of movement available. And it's nice and stiff and solid with that carbon arm instead of using a plastic one. And everything worked out good. So no issues with that at all. Again, nice and solid, no problems. So I think the next thing in the manual to move on to is our gear doors on the nacelles. So I'm going to get stuff organized and we'll probably get started on that. All right, so gear doors are all installed. They're not adjusted. But let's go to our radio system and I'll show you how the SE6 expander works in this scenario. So we'll turn our radio on. Right now the SE6 is plugged into E215. That port is set up as an EXT or EX bus port. Same as plugging it into the EXT port. So we'll go to our, we've got to turn this on first. Just trying to get rid of the glare, guys. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're going to go to our model first. We'll go down to Device Explorer, and you'll see that the SE6 shows up here. So we can't get into it. It won't open anything. The SE6 is all available through the JettyBox emulator. So you can either use the emulator in your radio, or you can plug this device into a JettyBox and do your adjustments through there. I'll show you quickly how to get in there and some of the basic things. So we're going to go to Advanced Properties, Applications, JettyBox, over, down, over, and over. Now this may not show up. Yeah, it's not showing up. So I'm going to plug this into the receiver and that'll allow it to show up. So let's plug that into the receiver. It works through the central box, but you always get a better signal through the receiver itself. So there we go, just plugged into the receiver. Power this back on. Okay. So we're going to go down. So there we go, SE6. So the SE6, what it's showing you there is the voltage through it, the signal, I guess. And then we go down and we get into our 3 menus. So there's 3 sub-menus in here. So actual values, settings, and service. So if you go to actual values, this just shows you some of the basic things that's going on. And that is back to the main menu. We'll go over, settings is where you do most of your stuff. So period is the output period. We use 11 milliseconds. Data port 6. So what this is saying is data port 6, this guy right here, this can be an EX bus pass-through. So you could still have this port available for the EXT function or whatever you're using, and then 5 additional ports available to run a servo. But we need all 6 ports, so we're saying that port number 6 is going to be a servo. And then we go down and down, and this tells the channels what it's going to be doing. So channel 1 on the SE6 is input 16 from the radio. Channel 2 is 17, 3 is 18, and so on and so forth. So there we go. So that's essentially the simplified version of the SE6 in the Jetty box. Now we're going to go out of here and we're going to go into our model function assignments. Now we do have our function set up as door. We've already talked about that, SB on the gear switch. And then we went to servo assignments now and we assigned 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 to doors. So we are using 6 of the, we'll call them channels to keep it simple, but 6 of the assignment ports of the 24 for doors. They're all using the same door function, which is just a door function, but each of these are now adjustable. So if we go into our servo setup, the first one is 16. We now have independent control of servo direction and travel and everything, but the benefit of doing this is we can simplify it by saying, okay, when we do our gear down, the door function opens. So all of those doors are going to open. Gear up, all the doors close. If you were using the same scenario and you want to have some doors closed, some doors open, one of the options is you could do door group number 1 and door group number 2. There's lots of different ways to route this thing, but that's essentially what we're doing with this setup. So like usual, we're going to work left to right. So that's how we need to designate these doors. So if we're sitting in the cockpit of the plane, our left nacelle, which is this guy right here, it's going to be door 1, door 2, sitting in the cockpit, door 3, door 4, right nacelle, door 5, door 6. So that's how we're going to organize things. So now what we do is we take this setup here and we bring it over to each of our nacelles and we plug the servos into the respective ports and we basically just adjust the limits in the servo menu for each of those servos. So the first door we're going to adjust is 16. We're going to adjust our limits, go to 17, plug the next door in. And what I'm going to do here to begin with is knock these values down all the way to 10% in both directions. And that'll make sure we don't wreck anything. And then we just work up from there with gear up and gear down. All right, so we've gone in here and I'll show you our 2 doors. So we've got door 16 and 17. So we're very similar in the travel departments. They're just reversed, obviously. So we got 77 and 93, and then 93 and 76. So they're essentially the same thing. We've done our linkages the same way, servo position the same way. So that is awesome. I love that. And now we'll just do gear up. And now gear down. We're not worried about any of the speed functions at this point because we're going to go in and create some different switches. We can slow things down, organize things to work with the landing gear. So there's lots of things we still need to adjust. The reason for this particular point is we just need those doors to operate with the gear switch properly, open and close. The limits and everything are all set, so that's what we're looking for. So that first nacelle is done. We're going to go to our second nacelle, which is output number 5 and 6, or input 5 and 6 on the SE6 switch, or expander. And then we're going to go to our front, which is ports number 3 and 4. All right, so moving on to the gear, getting the gears installed in the nacelle and also the front of the aircraft. Manual covers this very well. Our gear has been painted, of course, and as long as you follow the instructions, it goes together quite simple. So there's the outside of the wheel, the inside set up with washer and plastic washer, and then you've got a flat spot on there. The flat spot's very important. If you don't put the flat spot on, your tire will fall off or your wheel will fall off. And when we put this all together, we're also using Loctite on our screw. Now, some of the original kits were missing the little flange that I can see here. So there was some issues with the initial gear with this collar thing kind of popping off, but it looks like this is the next generation landing gear, which is good to see, and that's a positive thing. All right, so we got both of our mains installed, quite straightforward, quite simple. Now we're going to get our nose gear ready and get that installed, obviously, in the front of the aircraft. All right, so we've got the front gear installed in here. Now you have to pay attention to the gear leg opening cover system. So in this case, our servo arm and everything was contacting the side. So we did a little bit of trimming there, and I'll just extend this and retract it for you so you can see. We've just got our manual controller hooked up from Electron. And now with that trim, there's lots of space there for the arm to pass by. There we go, and there's a shot of our servo arm setup. So we've got another one of our carbon arms, the stock linkage setup and everything. So the only difference here with the manual is the manual, if you're paying attention to the pictures, it has the servo output shaft closer to the leg, and the stock linkage and everything here says that it should be away from the leg. You could still do it closer if you want, but you're going to have to trim this, this rod down. I like to have more distance here, and that's just the way we would normally do it. So anyways, yeah, so that's basically ready to go as well. We'll retract that back into the body. Beautiful. All right, so with front gear installed, we're now getting into our back to our nacelles and kind of our engine mounting and such. Now, we do not have our plate yet for mounting the engines to the firewalls, I guess you'd call it. So we are going to continue working on this portion and engine mounting to this and getting these ready to install, but we do have to wait a little bit for our template that was just left with the painter by accident. So we got our Meson ESCs put together. These are pretty straightforward. There's kind of the standard jetty setup that screws into the back. You've got your rubbers and your brass inserts, which are kind of like servo mounts, basically just a larger version. So this is all fairly new to me. Of course, I've never built this plane before, but we've got some distances here. So it says our final distance needs to be 6 5/8, 169 millimeters. So we're just gonna get that all figured out. And essentially what happens here with the engine boxes is this portion is adjustable, right? So yeah, you can adjust these guys depending on where they need to go. So anyways, I have a feeling they're going to be all the way out, but we'll see. And so we're going to work on this a little bit, get things queued up. All right, so fortunately, we're using the standard stock setup, and it looks like that makes things really easy. So our motor is 78 millimeters, measured just like that. So 169 minus 78 equals 91. And when you take these motor boxes and push them all the way open or all the way out, this distance is 91.5. So it's essentially perfect dimensions on these guys with it pushed all the way out. So that's nice to see. and that's the little brace piece that goes on there to make it a solid box, I guess. So anyways, the next things we're going to work through is getting the box created. So it goes through, you know, epoxying the box in place, putting some triangle stock around the box. So we're going to work on getting all that done. Fairly straightforward stuff. Again, you just follow the instructions. The only difference here is instead of using 30-minute epoxy, we're going to use something a little bit better like High Sol, West System, something like that. And just something a little bit better, what we're used to using. And then when we get to this step right here, this is where we're missing this, this template. So we'll end up probably painting these guys black and getting them prepared and ready to install, and stopping at this step right here and moving on from this step when we get our template. All right, so we've got our engine boxes all epoxied and reinforced. So I used West Systems Aero Epoxy on there, and I'm not sure if the manual or the instructions called for all of the areas that I did, but I did all the surfaces there. And then you also, when you put the brace on, so I did all the stuff on the inside, put the brace on, did the back side of the braces with a little piece that's included. I'll show you there. Hopefully that'll show up. There we go. And I just put the little balls on here to hold down the brace just to make sure that it stays put. So those guys are done, and we're going to let them cure till tomorrow. And once they're cured, we'll do a little bit of cleanup on them, like some of this epoxy here and pieces of my glove, and you know, sand the ends that are sticking out off, and we'll get them painted black so when we put them on, they completely blend in. All right, guys. If you've been following along with the Bronco so far, you know that the absolute biggest struggle that I have been having with this plane is where to put the darn ESCs. That has been hands down the biggest struggle with this plane. I've gone back and forth so many times on whether we're putting them behind the engines, right behind the firewall, in the fuselage, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And this is the final decision. The ESCs are going in the fuselage like they're supposed to be installed, right close to the batteries. Then the leads going from the ESCs to the engines will be the long leads. That's the final decision. I've waffled back and forth so many times on this. I'm actually not even putting it on the videos because it's been so many times back and forth. It's ridiculous. You guys would think I was nuts. Anyways, that's the route we're going. That's the plan we have in place. That's how we're doing it. All right, engine boxes are nice and cured. Now the only kicker with this guy is getting these engines lined up. So the actual holes that are drilled in the firewalls there, they are not the exact same layout as the mounts. But they're close, but they're very close. We'll get them centered in the holes, then we'll re-drill them so they're perfectly centered between those 4 holes. Once that's done, we need to open up the center hole a little bit to allow the wires to pass through, because right now the wires are not passing through that little hole. All right, so if I get this lined up even on all of the holes, you'll see how this lines up here. So if you look at that hole right there, that's how it's lining up on all of our holes. So basically the actual drilled hole is on the I don't know what you call that, but as tight to the center of the motor shaft as possible. All 4 of them are identical. So you can see the difference here. We opened up our hole in the firewall a little bit so our wires can pass through because the wires are sitting off center. We'll do the same thing on that side. Did a little bit of sanding right here so the tab for our motor can come out here. It comes out a little bit. So now we're going to take our drill bit and drill those holes. Initially I thought we were going to take the back plates off because we could just have this and set that on there, but the problem is with the wire with the bullet connectors already attached, they won't go through that little slot. Right there, we could sand that guy off, but I don't really want to do that because then there's a chance that the wires could rub the casing. So we put Loctite on all of our fasteners there, and we'll just do it this way, holding those guys up just like that. All right, guys, we got both of our engine boxes done up here. One thing I did is I took some thin CA, like water thin CA, and soaked all of our balsa in thin CA. So I soaked the face here to stiffen up the face, and then put some thin CA in all of the end cuts, so like in the holes here and here, all over the place, just to stiffen up the balsa and just to make it less susceptible to denting and stuff when you bolt that engine on. My apologies, we don't use engines with electric, we use motors. So here's one of them mounted, and we've got everything sorted out there. So that turned out perfect. Next thing we're gonna do is take these guys off, and we're gonna paint these black purely just to make it look better. That's it, that's the only reason, just to make it look good. So let's get these things painted black. All right, so as I mentioned previous, we are waiting for our template to drill our holes through the firewall there. So we're gonna work on our connectors now. So the left nacelle, we've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we're gonna use a 12-pin ashlock connector. And if we take a look at our wing, which is behind us, the hole coming through the wing is sort of in the middle of that space, right? So we've got our front here where my hand is, the back where our bolts are, and our opening in the underside of the wing is basically right in the middle. So we're just going to plan on our wires coming through the middle is the goal. So essentially our connector is going to end up sort of in this area right here. So it's going to be fairly simple with our ashlock connector, but all of our servo lines here, we are going to bundle them up and have them tucked down in the appropriate locations. So the left nacelle, we've got our 12-pin connector. Now the right nacelle, we've got 2 additional leads, right? We've got our elevator lead going to the back, and we've got our elevator light lead going to the back, or horizontal stab lead. So what we're probably going to end up doing there is a 12-pin connector and then another like 6-pin connector. So that's how we'll have that organized. So this side will have 2 connectors, and then we also have to think about our motor connectors as well too. Now those are going to be pretty short little bullet connectors. Our motor leads, when you look at the actual boxes, the motor leads, let's say they come right to the back here. So we have to plan on those bullet connectors coming to here and essentially going to this type of area. And I'm not quite sure yet how we're going to have those organized, if I'm just going to have them zip tied here and loose, or what the plan is. So I will figure that out though. But let's get our ashlock connectors sorted out first and get those guys done. So we've got all of our wires cleaned up in our nacelles here. So they come to a 12-pin connector in the left nacelle, and then our right nacelle, we've got a 12-pin connector and a 6-pin connector for our other 2 leads like we've talked about. So those are all done. It'll be nice and clean, easy to plug those in. Now the other thing we did was create some mounts for the bullet connectors coming off the motors. So these will just get screwed down to the sidewalls here. So our bullet connectors are going to come through here, and the wing, when you install it, you'll be installing the wing. We'll get them color coded so the rotation and everything's proper. So those are both created. We've high soled the back of them, tacked them in place with some CA, so those need to cure before we go any further with those. So now what we're doing is creating some extensions. So those extensions need to come from our mounts here, our connectors, just forward to where the engines plug in. So I'm doing this side first so we can create some holes in our mounts. The bullet connectors can go through, they can get glued in place, and then once those are done on this side, then we can solder on our other side, or the motor connections on the extension portion of that wire harness. All right, we scored our template. That's exactly what we were looking for. So this template, as it covers in the manual, gives you your mounting points. And when you put those mounting points in there, your engine mounts here, motor mounts, sorry, line up to those holes to get everything positioned correctly. So that's awesome. Obviously, we've got these guys painted as well too, so that's all done. Final step here with our plugs. These have all been installed with our bullet connectors. We've got shrink tube on there, and we've got our mounts all high-soled and completed now. So those are done. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill some holes through here. These guys will be installed like this, probably glued in place. And then once those are cured, we will install our other ends, which are the other female end of the bullet connectors that plug into the engines. Those are supplied with the motor itself. All right, so our wiring harness for the motors are installed. Now, when we do get our boxes installed here, getting the leads hooked up to the motors might be a little bit challenging, but all you have to do is undo these two screws. This will slide all the way forward. The leads will come out of our holes, be able to plug them in and slide them back. Now, I think this is a decent solution. Everything's well organized, so our wiring harnesses are going to be coming through this area right here. Our leads are going to be color-coded or labeled somehow for the motors, so those will just plug into the bullet connectors, and then our ash lock connectors will plug in on that side. And of course, the left pod here is a little bit more simple because you've only got one ash lock. So that is a huge amount completed. Very happy that we are making some wicked progress on this aircraft. Just want to give a shout out to you channel members. Thank you for being channel members. If you're watching this and you're curious, what the heck is a channel member? Well, channel members get early access to our videos. So channel membership is not a free thing, it's a paid thing. There's some links down below, but channel members get access to our videos about 1 to 2 weeks early. We usually have 1 to 2 weeks of videos uploaded to YouTube. And as soon as they're uploaded to YouTube, they're listed for views by the channel members, and they get to watch them all before everybody else on YouTube gets to see them. So thank you, channel members, for your support. All right, guys, and that wraps up video number 3 in the Hangar 9 Bronco Ov-10 assembly. This thing is turning out very nice. I'm happy with the progress so far, and everything's going very well. I have a feeling that next video will probably be the wrap-up of the aircraft. We'll see how things go. We still have a lot to accomplish, but a lot of it's like wiring and detail work and stuff, so we'll see how things go. But thanks for tuning into the video series. Video 4 will come out soon. If you're not a subscriber, I encourage you to subscribe. A lot of our viewers aren't actually subscribers of the channel. So I think it's like 60-something% of our viewers have not subscribed to the channel. It's the freest thing that you can do. So hit that subscribe button down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.